Welcome to your sleep story. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Whatever this day was, however long it felt, however much it carried, it is behind you now, completely behind you. You made it through, and that is everything. So let's begin. Before I take you anywhere tonight, I want to count you down from 10 to 1. And as I count, I want you to allow yourself to sink just a little deeper into wherever you are right now. Feel the weight of your body. Feel what is beneath you, holding you. And with each number, just let go a little more. 10. Allow your eyes to close. Gently, completely. There is nothing you need to see right now. 9. Feel your shoulders and let them drop as far as they want to go. 8. A slow breath in through the nose. 7. And all the way out. 6. Your hands. Feel them opening. Whatever you've been holding today, you can put it down now. 5. Your jaw is soft. Your face is soft. 4. Your legs are heavy, warm. 3. You're drifting, not asleep yet, but moving that way. 2. The day is behind you, completely and entirely behind you. 1. And now, tonight's sleep story, the relaxation. Before we go anywhere, I want to stay here with you for a moment. Just here, just now, because this moment, this exact moment right now, where you are lying in the quiet, deserves a little attention, a little kindness. Take a breath in for me, from the very bottom of the belly. Good, and let it go. And as you breathe out, I want you to imagine that everything you were carrying today, every worry, every unfinished thought, every heavy thing is just leaving with that breath, just drifting away. You don't have to solve anything tonight. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to be anything other than exactly what you are right now. A person who deserves rest, a person who deserves sleep, because you do, you really do. Whatever happened today, however hard it felt, however much it carried, you made it through. You are here, and that is enough. That is more than enough. You are safe, and you are here. Bring your awareness gently to your feet now. Just notice them and allow them to soften. The toes uncurling, the arches releasing. All the small held tension of the day simply letting go. Let that softness travel upward, through the calves, through the knees, the thighs. All of it warm, all of it heavy, all of it resting now. Your lower back, your hips. Allow yourself to feel the surface beneath you taking your weight completely, fully. You don't have to hold yourself up anymore. The earth has you. The old rock has you. The belly soft. The chest soft. The heart beating steadily as it always has, as it always will. Your shoulders dropping, your arms heavy and warm, your hands open and still, the neck long and loose, and your face, let the jaw go. Let the forehead smooth. Let the eyes be completely still behind their lids. There you are, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, completely soft, completely warm, completely at rest. You've done beautifully. Now, let me take you somewhere the Atlantic exhales slowly against dark rock, and small clear pools hold their own quiet worlds between one tide and the next. And an old man with a lantern and a notebook walks the same stretch of Irish shoreline he has walked for 60 years, bending every so often to look closely at something small and patient and alive. Come with me, the road to the shore. Imagine a road along the west coast of Ireland, County Clare perhaps, or further north into Galway or Mayo. The particular county matters less than the general character of this whole stretch of coastline, where the land simply ends abruptly and dramatically in dark cliffs and broken rock. The full unbroken weight of the North Atlantic arriving, wave after wave, against shores that have absorbed this same patient battering for longer than any human memory could properly account for. The evening is soft, not bright. The west of Ireland rarely offers the kind of clear, dramatic gold light you might have found on a Tuscan hillside or a Hokkaido lavender field. Instead, a gentler, more diffused light, filtered through a thin, ever-present layer of high cloud, the whole sky and sea taking on a soft, pearled gray-silver quality that has its own particular, quiet beauty. The road runs close to the coast here, separated from the cliff edge by only a low stone wall, built generations ago from the same dark, weathered rock the whole landscape is made of. The wall stones fitted together without mortar in the old dry stone tradition, each one chosen and placed by hands that understood exactly how to balance and interlock irregular shapes into something that has stood largely unchanged for well over a century. Sheep graze in the small, irregular fields beyond the wall, their wool noticeably coarser and more weather-toughened than the gentler Welsh hill breeds you may have encountered on another evening's journey. These are animals built for genuinely harsh Atlantic exposure, for salt spray and relentless wind and rain that can arrive in this part of Ireland on almost any day of the year, in any season. The smell, even from inside a car with the window only slightly open, finds its way in immediately. Salt, seaweed, rich and mineral, the particular, unmistakable smell of the Atlantic meeting old Irish rock. The road descends gently toward a small cluster of buildings, a handful of whitewashed cottages, a small pub with its lights just beginning to glow in the gathering dusk, and beyond them, a rough track leading down toward the shore itself. You leave the road. You follow the track toward the water. The shore, the land gives way, finally, to rock, not sand. This stretch of coastline offers little of the soft, pale beach that might come to mind when you imagine an ordinary seaside evening. Instead, dark, ancient stone, folded and layered, and exposed by millions of years of geological time, stretching out toward the water in broad, uneven shelves and slabs, the whole surface scoured and shaped by the relentless work of waves across an almost unimaginable span of years. The tide this evening is on its way out. Not fully out. The water still covers the lower reaches of the rock shelf. The waves arriving in their steady, patient rhythm, breaking white against the dark stone before drawing back slowly to gather themselves for the next arrival. But the upper rocks, further from the water's current edge, have already been exposed for some time, their surfaces drying in patches, the seaweed draped across them beginning to dull slightly from its fully submerged, glossy brightness toward the duller, more muted color it takes on once exposed to open air and scattered across this whole exposed expanse of rock. Pools, tide pools, small, clear, sheltered hollows in the stone, each one holding its own modest portion of seawater, trapped here by the retreating tide, each one its own small, temporary, endlessly fascinating world. A figure moves slowly among them, a small lantern in one hand, even though the evening light has not yet fully failed. A worn leather satchel slung across one shoulder. He moves carefully, his attention clearly absorbed by whatever each pool in turn offers him. You walk toward him across the broad, uneven rock. The first breath, the smell of this shoreline up close, is layered and specific in a way that rewards careful attention. Salt first and most obvious, the clean, sharp, mineral tang of open ocean, carried on whatever breeze moves across this exposed stretch of coast. Beneath the salt, seaweed, and here, the smell becomes considerably more complex than a single word can really capture. The bladderwrack draped across the upper rocks offers one particular note, slightly sulfurous, rich, and organic. The kelp further down, still mostly submerged, offers something different, greener, more vegetal. Each species of seaweed along this shore, Tamaz could tell you, carries its own distinct olfactory signature, recognizable to a sufficiently patient and attentive nose. And beneath the seaweed, the rock itself, wet stone has its own particular smell, mineral and slightly metallic, carrying, faintly, the memory of whatever ancient geological processes first formed this particular dark rock, long before any sea existed to wash against it at all. And underneath everything, something harder to name precisely, something you might simply call the smell of the sea itself, a combination of brine and decaying organic matter and clean ozone-rich air that, taken together, produces the specific, unmistakable atmosphere of an Atlantic shoreline at the changing of the tide. You breathe it in. The wind moves steadily against your face, cool and faintly damp, carrying with it the distant calls of seabirds settling for the evening on the cliffs above. You continue toward the lantern light. Tamaz, he is 81 years old. His name is Tamaz. He has walked this particular stretch of shoreline, observing its tide pools with the same patient, careful attention for 61 years. Since he was a young man of 20, recently returned from several years working on fishing boats out of a nearby harbor town, an experience that taught him a great deal about the sea's larger moods and dangers. he eventually realized, far more interested in its smaller, more intimate details. He gave up the fishing boats, much to his own family's initial bewilderment, and took up instead a quieter, less obviously productive occupation, walking this shore almost daily, observing and recording the small, intricate communities of life that the tide pools sustain, gradually becoming, across the decades, something between an amateur naturalist and an informal local institution. The man you would ask, in this whole district, if you found something unusual washed up or living among the rocks, and wanted to know what it actually was. He has no formal scientific training. In the conventional sense, no university degree, no institutional affiliation, though several visiting marine biologists across the decades have made a point of seeking him out specifically, recognizing in his accumulated, patient, decades-long observations a depth of practical knowledge about this particular stretch of coastline that no amount of formal academic study could easily replicate. He carries, as he does most evenings, a small leather satchel containing a magnifying glass, a simple notebook, and a thermos of tea, along with the lantern, which he brings less because he genuinely needs its light at this hour, and more from long habit, a tool that has, across 6 decades, become almost an extension of his own hand, ready for the evenings when the light does, eventually, fail more completely than it has so far tonight. He is crouched now, beside one particular pool, utterly absorbed, his attention given as completely and as patiently to this small, modest hollow of trapped seawater as Henry Belleck once gave his attention to a muelet of rose absolute, as Elisabetta gave hers to a torn page of medieval vellum. The tide pool, let me describe closely what Tamaz is looking at, because a tide pool, properly attended to, reveals far more than its modest size would initially suggest. This particular pool is perhaps a meter across, roughly oval, its bottom a mixture of smooth, water-worn pebbles and patches of exposed bedrock, draped here and there with delicate fronds of a smaller, more delicate seaweed than the rougher bladderwrack, covering the drier rocks nearby. The water itself is remarkably clear, the low evening light penetrating easily to the pool's modest bottom, revealing, to a patient eye, a surprising density of life. Anemones first, several of them, their soft, translucent tentacles extended into the still water, waiting with endless patience for some small, unfortunate creature to drift within reach. Tamaz has watched individual anemones in this exact pool, or ones very much like it, return to this same general spot across years of seasonal observation, their slow, rooted lives unfolding at a pace almost geological by comparison with the brief, busy lives of the small fish and crustaceans that share their world. Small fish, too, a tiny goby, perhaps, darting with quick, nervous movements between the pebbles whenever Tamaz's shadow falls too directly across the water's surface, settling again into stillness. Once he shifts his position slightly to give it more comfortable cover, a hermit crab, dragging its borrowed shell across the pool's sandy bottom, with the particular unhurried determination that hermit crabs always seem to bring to even their most ordinary movements, and tucked into a shadowed crevice at the pool's deeper end, a small, dark shape that Tamaz recognizes immediately from decades of exactly this kind of patient observation. As a young blenny, one of the small, well-camouflaged fish species that make these intertidal pools their particular and specialized home. He does not disturb any of it. He simply watches, his magnifying glass occasionally raised for a closer look at some particular small detail. His pencil making, every so often, a brief, careful note in the small notebook balanced on his knee. The notebook, Tamaz's notebooks, and there are, by now, a great many of them, filling several shelves in his small cottage above the shore, represent, collectively, one of the most genuinely remarkable informal records of intertidal life anywhere along this whole stretch of Irish coast. He began keeping them, almost by accident, in his first year of serious shoreline observation, simply because he found himself wanting to remember which pools held which particular creatures, wanting to track, across the changing seasons, how the populations of anemones and crabs and small fish shifted and changed. The habit grew, gradually, into something far more systematic. Today's entry, written in his careful, slightly cramped hand, records the pool's location relative to a particular distinctive boulder he uses as a fixed reference point. The tide's current state, the water temperature, estimated by feel rather than any precise instrument, and a brief description of what he has observed. The three anemones, their particular positions relative to each other. The young blenny, a note that this particular individual fish appears, by its size and coloring, to be the same one he first noticed in this pool several weeks earlier. This kind of patient, long-term, individual level observation, tracking, essentially, the life history of particular small creatures in particular small pools across months and even years, is precisely the kind of data that formal scientific surveys, with their broader scope and more limited time in any given location, rarely manage to collect. Several marine biology researchers from the regional university have, across recent years, begun incorporating Tamaz's decades of careful notebooks into their own more formal studies of how the diversity and resilience of intertidal life on this particular coastline have shifted across the considerable span of time. His records cover changes related to warming sea temperatures, to shifting storm patterns, to the slow, accumulated pressure of a changing climate on these small, intricate, easily overlooked communities. Tamaz finds this collaboration late in his long life of solitary observation a quietly satisfying development. His decades of patient, unglamorous attention, kept faithfully for reasons that were never originally about contributing to any larger scientific record, have turned out, almost by accident, to matter considerably more than he ever originally imagined they might. The history of this shore. Let me tell you something about the deeper history of this particular stretch of coastline. Because the rock itself, beneath Tomas's careful feet, carries a history of truly enormous scale. The dark stone that forms these broad shelves and broken cliffs is, in geological terms, extraordinarily old, laid down, originally, as sediment at the bottom of some ancient, vanished sea, hundreds of millions of years before anything resembling the modern Atlantic Ocean existed at all, before the very continents had arranged themselves into anything like their current configuration. Across the unimaginable span of geological time since then, this rock has been folded, compressed, lifted, and exposed by forces of almost inconceivable scale. The slow, patient grinding of tectonic plates against each other, the rise and fall of entire mountain ranges, the long, gradual processes of erosion that have, eventually, brought this particular stretch of ancient seabed rock to its current position, exposed to the open Atlantic air, forming the dramatic cliffs and broken shoreline that Tomas has spent 61 years walking and observing. The tide pools themselves, by contrast, are a far more recent and far more temporary feature of this landscape. Small, shifting hollows worn into the rock by the relatively brief, by geological standards, action of waves and weather across, at most, the past several thousand years since the sea settled into something approximating its current level following the last great ice age. Each individual pool, in fact, has its own much shorter lifespan still. Most will eventually be reshaped, deepened, or filled in entirely by the same patient erosive forces that created them in the first place. A process that might unfold across mere decades or centuries rather than the hundreds of millions of years the underlying rock itself required to form. Tomas thinks about this layered, nested scale of time often during his quiet evening observations. The almost incomprehensibly ancient rock, the more modest but still considerable age of the pools themselves, and then, briefer still, the individual lives of the anemones and fish and crabs he observes, lives measured in mere months or years, all of it happening simultaneously in this one small patch of shoreline, each different scale of time somehow coexisting peacefully within the same few square meters of dark, wet rock. He finds this layering, the way it places his own modest 61 years of observation into proper, humbling perspective against the rock's far vaster history. One of the most genuinely calming aspects of this whole practice he has built his life around. The tide itself. Let me draw your attention now to the tide's own steady, patient movement, because it governs, in the most fundamental possible way, everything Tomas does on this shore. The tide is currently ebbing, moving out, gradually exposing more of the rock shelf as the evening progresses. The specific pools Tomas can access and observe shifting steadily as the water's edge retreats further down toward its eventual low point. Expected, according to the tide tables Tamaz has consulted every single day of his 61 years of shore walking, sometime around midnight tonight. This rhythm, the tide's reliable, twice daily advance and retreat, governed by the moon's own steady orbital pull on the planet's vast oceans, has structured Tamaz's entire working life with a regularity that few other occupations could offer. He knows, with an accuracy built from decades of accumulated practical experience, rather than any need to constantly consult printed tables, roughly how the tide will behave on any given evening, how far it will retreat, which particular pools will become newly accessible at low tide that remain submerged at other points in the cycle, which creatures he is therefore likely to encounter at this particular hour, on this particular evening. The tide does not care, in any meaningful sense, about Tamaz's own schedule or preferences. It simply continues, governed by forces: lunar gravity, the Earth's rotation, the complex underlying geometry of ocean basins that operate entirely independently of any human concern, exactly as the seasons govern Anton's charcoal burning calendar, exactly as the lunar calendar governs the timing of Pema's Bhutanese festivals. Tamaz has, across 61 years, learned to organize his entire practice around this larger, indifferent rhythm rather than fighting against it. Walking the shore when the tide makes walking possible, observing what each particular tidal state happens to reveal, accepting, with the same patient equanimity he brings to nearly everything else in this practice, that some pools and some creatures will only become available to his careful attention at certain specific hours, on certain specific days, according to a schedule that ultimately answers to the moon rather than to any human convenience. The SEABIRDS, above the shore, on the dark cliffs rising behind Tamaz's careful evening rounds, the local seabird colonies are settling for the night, their calls drifting down across the rocks in a loose, scattered chorus that has its own particular evening rhythm. Kittiwakes mostly along this particular stretch, their distinctive calls, which give the species its common name, a fair approximation of the sound itself, carrying clearly through the cooling evening air, gradually quieting as individual birds settle onto their cliff-face nesting ledges for the night. A few fulmars, too, gliding on stiff wings along the cliff face, even in this fatting light, their flight pattern distinctive even to an untrained eye, gradually drawn into the same general settling rhythm as their kittiwake neighbors, and occasionally the deeper, more resonant call of a raven, one of the larger, more solitary birds that share this dramatic coastal landscape, its voice carrying a different quality entirely from the lighter, more numerous gulls and kittiwakes, something older and more deliberate in its tone. Tamaz has spent enough decades on this shore to recognize, by ear alone, roughly which species is calling at any given moment, and roughly what that calling typically signifies. The difference between ordinary evening settling behavior and the more agitated, alarmed calling that might signal a genuine disturbance, a predator moving too close to nesting site, or some other small drama playing out, invisible to him from his position among the lower tide pools, somewhere on the cliff face above. Tonight, the bird's calling carries the easy, unhurried quality of ordinary evening settling. No particular alarm, simply the accumulated, layered sound of several thousand individual seabirds completing their own daily routine of returning to roost. As the light continues its slow fade toward true darkness, what the tide pools teach, Tamaz has thought, across 61 years of nearly daily observation, about what these small, patient, endlessly varied pools have taught him. They have taught him, first, something about the particular value of close, sustained attention to small things. Most people walking this same shore would see only rock and water and seaweed. An undifferentiated, somewhat unremarkable landscape. Interesting perhaps for a few minutes, but not obviously rewarding any deeper, more sustained engagement. Tamaz has learned, across decades of patient practice, that this initial impression is almost entirely wrong. That within any single, modest tide pool, properly attended to, exists an entire small world of genuine complexity and interest, populated by creatures living out their own complete, intricate lives, adapting, competing, surviving, across timescales ranging from the brief, urgent moments of a small fish evading a hungry anemone's reach to the much longer, more patient rhythms of an anemone's own slow, rooted, multi-year existence in one particular favored crevice of rock. This lesson, learned initially and specifically about tide pools, has gradually extended across Tamaz's long life into something closer to a general philosophy, a conviction that almost anything looked at with sufficient patience and sufficient sustained attention reveals a depth and complexity that a more hurried, more superficial glance would never manage to detect. The pools have also taught him something about impermanence and about finding peace within it rather than resisting it. Each individual pool is, in geological terms, a genuinely temporary feature, formed gradually by erosion, destined, eventually, to be reshaped or destroyed by the very same patient forces that created it. The creatures within any given pool, likewise, live brief lives. By comparison with the rock itself, their whole existence playing out within a single tidal pool's relatively modest lifespan. And yet none of this impermanence, Tamaz has come to believe, diminishes the genuine value or the genuine beauty of what exists, however briefly, within any particular pool, at any particular moment of careful observation. The anemone's slow, patient life matters, fully and completely, even though it will not last forever, even though this exact pool will not last forever, even though the broader rock itself, however ancient, by ordinary human measure, represents only a brief and ultimately temporary chapter in the planet's own far vaster geological story. Tamaz has found, in this acceptance, a particular and durable kind of peace, one that has only deepened across his own 81 years of life, as his own body has, inevitably, begun showing the gentle wear of advancing age in ways his younger self, kneeling beside these same pools 61 years ago, could not yet have fully anticipated. The lantern, as the evening light continues its slow fade toward true darkness, Tamaz finally lights his lantern properly, the small flame catching easily, its warm glow casting a gentle, focused light onto the pool he continues to observe. This particular lantern, an old kerosene model rather than any more modern battery-powered alternative, was his father's before it was his. One of the few possessions Tamaz specifically requested decades ago, when his father's own modest estate was eventually settled following his death. His father was not a naturalist, particularly, nor any kind of shoreline observer, a farmer mostly, working a small inland holding some kilometers from this exact coast. The lantern itself, originally purchased for entirely practical purposes, lighting evening work in the farm's various outbuildings during the years before reliable rural electricity reached this particular corner of Ireland. Tamaz has adapted it across his own decades of shoreline work to a use his father likely never specifically imagined for it, though he believes, in his own quiet way, that his father would have approved, recognizing in his son's patient, careful, lantern-lit evening observations something of the same unhurried, attentive relationship with the natural world that farming, properly practiced across a long working lifetime, also eventually teaches anyone willing to learn its patient lessons. The lantern's warm light now falls gently across the tide pool's clear surface, illuminating in newly sharp detail the small anemones and the cautious, half-hidden blenny, the whole little world suddenly rendered in this soft, artificial glow, in considerably more vivid color and texture than the fading natural evening light alone could any longer provide. Tamaz makes one final careful note in his notebook, closes it gently, and rises slowly, his knees announcing the movement with the same small, familiar stiffness that Lorenzo's knees once announced in his own Italian garden, that Tanaka-san's knees announce on his own Hokkaido hillside. He continues his slow walk along the shore, the lantern light moving with him, toward the next pool waiting patiently for his attention. The sound of the shore. Let me stay with you here, on this dark and quietly busy shoreline, and simply listen to what surrounds you. The waves, first and most constant, their steady, rhythmic arrival against the lower rocks, the characteristic Atlantic sound of considerable accumulated force expressing itself. Here, at this particular point of contact between ocean and ancient stone, with a patient, unhurried persistence that has continued, essentially unchanged in its essential character, for as long as this rock has existed in anything like its current exposed form. The smaller, more intimate sound of water moving within the tide pools themselves, a gentle slosh and trickle as each retreating waves, last reaching fingers of water, find their way briefly into the pool's edges before withdrawing again. A much quieter, more delicate version of the larger waves' steady rhythm. The seabirds, settling gradually into silence on the cliffs above, their calls growing sparser and further apart as full darkness continues its slow arrival. The wind, moving steadily across the exposed rock shelf, carrying the mingled smell of salt and seaweed in slow, shifting currents, and very occasionally, a small, specific sound from within a pool itself, the faint click of a hermit crab's shell against stone as it shifts position. A tiny, almost imperceptible splash as some small fish breaks the water's surface briefly before submerging again. This is the sound of an Irish Atlantic shore at the changing of the tide. Ancient, patient, layered with both the vast, continuous rhythm of the ocean itself and the countless small, specific, equally patient lives unfolding within its temporary tide pools. The cottage above the shore, Tamaz's home, stands a short walk up from the shoreline. A modest stone cottage, whitewashed like most traditional buildings in this region. Its small windows facing out toward the sea. The same view he has woken to and returned to at the end of nearly every day for 61 years. He lives alone now, has lived alone for the past 9 years, since his wife, Bridget, passed away after a long illness that occupied much of their final years together with the particular, demanding tenderness that such illnesses require. She used to walk the shore with him often in their younger years, though her own interest, she always cheerfully admitted, was considerably less specialized than his own. She came mostly for the simple pleasure of the walk itself, and for his company, content to let him pursue his careful pool-by-pool observations, while she gathered the occasional piece of attractive sea glass or interesting shell for her own small windowsill collection back at the cottage. Tamaz still keeps that small collection exactly as she arranged it on the same windowsill. A quiet, unremarkable shrine to 52 years of marriage that he has never felt any particular need to disturb or rearrange. He speaks to her sometimes during his evening walks in much the same easy, unself-conscious way that Lorenzo speaks to his own late wife among his Italian cypress trees, that Don Roberto might, in his own quieter moments, reflect on Maria Alina's steady presence beside him. The lavender is good this year, Yuki, Tanaka-san might say, on a different continent entirely, looking out at his own hillside. The blenny is back in the third pool, Bridget, Tamaz might say tonight, crouched beside the clear, lantern-lit water, speaking the words quietly, almost without conscious decision, simply because the small discovery feels, somehow, more complete when shared, even with someone who can no longer answer. He does not expect an answer. He has made his own quiet peace with that across these 9 years, exactly as the other patient keepers of these various traditions have each, in their own ways and their own time, made peace with their own particular losses. The rock pools in storm season. Let me tell you briefly about a different kind of evening on this same shore, because Tamaz's relationship with these pools has not always carried the gentle, settled quality of tonight's calm walk. Winter storms along this stretch of Atlantic coast arrive with a force that can be genuinely difficult to convey to anyone who has not personally witnessed them. Waves rising to heights that send spray well over the tops of the highest accessible rock shelves. Winds strong enough to make standing upright in the most exposed locations a real and considered effort. Tamaz does not walk the shore in any close or careful way during the worst of these storms. The risk, even for someone with his decades of accumulated familiarity with this exact terrain, would be genuinely unwise. But he watches, often, from a safer vantage point further back from the water's edge, observing the storm's raw power with the same patient, attentive curiosity he brings to the quieter pools of a calm summer evening. And he has learned across these decades that the pools themselves, far from being simply destroyed by such violence, often emerge from even the most severe storms with their basic populations remarkably intact. The anemones gripping their chosen rock faces with a tenacity that allows them to survive forces that would sweep away almost anything less perfectly adapted to this specific, demanding environment. The hermit crabs and small fish finding shelter in crevices and beneath larger stones, riding out the storm's violence in spaces too small and too sheltered for the worst of the wave action to fully penetrate. This resilience, observed and recorded across so many individual storms throughout his 61 years, has taught Tamaz something he considers among the most valuable lessons his whole long practice has offered him: apparent fragility in a sufficiently well-adapted creature can coexist with genuine, remarkable toughness. The anemone looks delicate, its soft tentacles waving gently in even the calmest water. It is, in fact, one of the most durable, most storm-resistant creatures on this entire violent shore. The children who come to learn, Tamaz does not work entirely alone these days, though his daily practice remains, in its essential character, much the same solitary pursuit it has always been. A small number of local children across recent years have taken to occasionally joining him on his evening walks, drawn initially by simple curiosity about the old man with the lantern, who seems to find such genuine, sustained fascination in pools most people walk past without a second glance. He welcomes them patiently, teaching them gradually exactly as Elisabetta teaches Francesca in her Florence studio, exactly as Tanaka-san teaches his granddaughter on his Hokkaido hillside, not through any formal lesson plan, simply through the accumulated example of his own careful attention, showing them how to crouch quietly beside a pool without disturbing its inhabitants, how to recognize the difference between an anemone's closed, resting state and its more active feeding posture, how to hold a small crab gently enough to examine it closely before returning it, unharmed, to exactly the spot where it was found. One particular girl, perhaps 11 years old, named Aoife, has shown a depth of genuine interest that reminds Tamaz, more than he has admitted to anyone, of his own younger self at a similar age. The same patient fascination with small, overlooked details that first drew him away from the fishing boats and toward this quieter, more contemplative shoreline practice. She has begun keeping her own small notebook, her handwriting still developing, her observations simpler than his own, but carrying the same essential spirit of careful, patient attention. Tamaz has begun to wonder, on his more hopeful evenings, whether something of his own 61 years of accumulated practice might, through Aoife's gradually developing interest, find some way of continuing forward past whatever years remain to him. In much the same way Matteo continues Don Roberto's sheep station, in much the same way Matthews continues Anton's careful charcoal burning craft. He does not press the matter. He simply continues, patiently showing her what he knows, exactly as it was shown to him decades ago, by no one in particular, simply by the shore itself, and by his own willingness to kneel down again and again and look closely. The night watch, as full darkness finally settles completely over the shoreline, Tamaz continues his slow circuit a while longer, the lantern's warm light now providing the only real illumination across this whole dark, exposed stretch of rock. He visits, in turn, several more of his familiar pools, checking on a particular crab he has been tracking for several weeks, noting the continued healthy presence of a small colony of mussels clinging to one especially exposed rock face, pausing for a longer while beside a deeper pool where, on certain nights, a small octopus has occasionally made a brief, fascinating appearance, though tonight, it seems, the octopus remains hidden somewhere beyond his lantern's modest reach. This nighttime portion of his walk, conducted entirely by lantern light, reveals a somewhat different community of shore life than the daytime hours typically offer. Certain creatures, more cautious of the more numerous daytime predators and the occasional curious human visitor, become noticeably more active and more visible once full darkness provides them with additional cover. Tamaz has, across his decades of practice, come to particularly treasure these later, quieter hours when the shore belongs, in practice, almost entirely to himself and to whatever nocturnal creatures choose to reveal themselves to his patient lantern light. The tide continues its own steady retreat throughout this period, reaching Eventually, somewhere close to midnight, its lowest point of the current cycle, the moment when the greatest possible extent of rock and pool becomes briefly, temporarily accessible, before the tide begins its own equally patient return, gradually reclaiming, pool by pool, the territory it has spent these recent hours exposing. The turning tide. Tamaz recognizes the tide's turn by several small, accumulated signs, rather than by any single dramatic indicator. A subtle shift in the particular sound and rhythm of the waves against the lower rocks. A slight change in the angle and behavior of certain seaweed strands he has learned across decades to use as informal, reliable markers. The water begins its slow return. This is, in its own quiet way, one of the most reliably moving moments of Tamaz's whole nightly practice. Watching the patient, inexorable Atlantic begin reclaiming the rock shelf it spent the preceding hours exposing, each returning wave reaching, very gradually, a little further up the slope than the wave before it, the whole vast ocean's accumulated weight and patience expressing itself in this slow, steady, entirely predictable advance. He begins making his own way back toward higher ground, ahead of the rising water, exactly as he has timed this same return countless times across 61 years of practice. His accumulated knowledge of this particular shore's tidal rhythms, ensuring he is never genuinely at risk of being caught by water rising faster than his own steady, careful pace can comfortably outdistance. The pools he has spent this whole evening observing will, within the coming hours, be reclaimed entirely by the returning sea. Their small, temporary populations of anemones and fish and crabs returning, in effect, to the much larger, more continuous ocean from which the retreating tide had briefly, temporarily separated them. Tomorrow's low tide, governed by the same patient lunar rhythm, will expose a slightly different configuration of pools, slightly different in their exact boundaries and contents, though recognizably, fundamentally, the same general community of shoreline life that Tamaz has observed with endless patience across these past 61 years. The walk home, Tamaz climbs slowly back up the rough track toward his small cottage, his lantern's light bobbing gently with each careful step. The dark shore behind him gradually disappearing into the deeper darkness of full night and the steadily rising tide. The cottage windows, dark when he left several hours earlier, remain dark now. There is no one waiting for him with a lit lamp in any window, exactly as there once was in the years before Bridget's passing. But he does not find this absence as sharp or as painful as it once was. In those first difficult months and years following her death, he has settled gradually into his own particular accommodation with this solitude, finding in the patient, attentive practice of his shoreline observations a sustaining companionship of its own kind. The tide pools and their small, persistent inhabitants offering, in their own way, a steady presence that has helped carry him through these 9 years, since Bridget's passing with rather more grace and rather less loneliness than he might once have expected. He reaches his door. He sets down his satchel, extinguishes his lantern, having no further need of its light now that he is safely inside his own small, familiar home. He prepares a simple late supper: bread, a little cheese, the last of the tea from his thermos, reheated briefly on his own small stove. He eats slowly at his kitchen table, the window beside him showing only darkness now. The shore and its pools and its patient, persistent small lives already largely reclaimed by the rising Atlantic tide. The shelves of NOTBOOKS. Before retiring fully for the night, Tomas pauses, as he often does, beside the shelves in his small front room that hold the accumulated decades of his careful observation notebooks, 61 years worth, by now, filling considerably more shelf space than his modest cottage was originally designed to accommodate. The overflow eventually requiring him, some years ago, to build a simple additional set of shelves himself, using timber salvaged, appropriately enough, from a piece of old shipwreck wood that had washed up years before on the very shore his notebooks so faithfully document. He does not often reread the older volumes in any systematic way, though he occasionally finds himself drawn, on a particular quiet evening, to pull down some specific year's notebook and trace back through his own younger handwriting, encountering again some long-forgotten observation, some particular pool or particular creature he had entirely lost conscious memory of until the notebook's careful record returned it to him. Tonight, he simply looks at the shelves for a moment, their considerable accumulated bulk, a quiet, physical testament to 61 years of patient, consistent attention given to one small, modest, easily overlooked stretch of Irish coastline. He has never sought any particular recognition for this accumulated work, beyond the recent, welcome collaboration with the university researchers who have begun drawing on his records. He has done this work across these 6 decades, primarily for its own sake, for the simple, sustaining pleasure of close, patient attention to small things, for the particular companionship he has found across a long life that has included both considerable joy and considerable loss, in the steady, reliable rhythms of tide and pool, and the small, persistent creatures that make their homes within them. He turns off his lamp. He retires for the night. You are drifting. You are still on that dark shore, in a sense, or resting somewhere very like it. The waves continuing their steady, patient rhythm against the rocks. The tide pools, even now, even in full darkness, holding their own small, complete worlds, waiting for tomorrow's low tide to expose them once again to careful, patient attention. Tomas's lantern has been extinguished, his evening's careful rounds complete, his small cottage settling into its own quiet darkness above the rising sea. All of it here, all of it holding you. Your breathing has slowed to match the tide's own steady, ancient rhythm, advancing, retreating, advancing again. Never hurried, never anything other than exactly as patient and as reliable as it has always been, governed by forces far larger and far steadier than any single concern of any single day. This is what a tide pool watcher's quiet evening offers, if you allow yourself to receive it, even only in imagination, even only for this one quiet hour before your own sleep arrives. That close, patient attention to small things reveals depths that a hurried glance would never find. That impermanence, the pool's temporary existence, the brief life of the creatures within it, even, eventually, our own, does not diminish the genuine value of what exists, fully and completely, within whatever time it is actually given. You do not need to observe anything tonight. You can simply rest, the way the tide pools rest, however briefly, between one wave's retreat and the next one's eventual return, trusting completely in a rhythm far older and far steadier than any single concern of your own particular day. The last things, the shore lies dark now beneath the rising Atlantic tide. The pool's Tamaz spent his evening observing gradually disappearing beneath the returning water, their small, patient inhabitants returning for these hours to the larger ocean from which the retreating tide had briefly separated them. The seabirds rest on their dark cliff ledges, their evening settling long complete. Tamaz's lantern hangs, extinguished, beside his cottage door, ready for tomorrow evening's walk. His notebooks rest on their shelves. 61 years of patient observation. Today's entry complete. Tomorrow's page still blank, waiting. Bridget's small collection of sea glass and shells rests undisturbed on its windowsill, exactly as she once arranged it. The dark, ancient rock holds its own vast geological patience beneath the returning sea, indifferent in its own enormous way to any single tide's advance or retreat, to any single observer's 61 years of careful attention, to any single human lifetime at all. And yet, within that vast indifference, the small, specific, patient lives continue. The anemones, the hermit crabs, the cautious blennies, each one living out its own complete existence within whatever brief span of time. The tide and the rock and the patient unfolding of circumstance happen to allow it. Tamaz sleeps in his small cottage above the shore, the same shore he will walk again tomorrow, and the day after, and for as many more patient, attentive days as his own remaining years allow him. The shore is dark beneath the rising tide. The pools are disappearing beneath the returning water, their small worlds rejoining the larger sea, until tomorrow's low tide reveals them again. The seabirds rest on their dark cliff ledges. The lantern hangs extinguished by the cottage door, ready for tomorrow. The notebooks rest on their shelves. 61 years of patient attention. Today's page complete, tomorrow's page waiting. Bridget's shells rest on the windowsill, exactly as she arranged them. The ancient rock holds its vast, patient silence beneath the returning Atlantic, indifferent and yet somehow holding everything. Tamaz is sleeping, his evenings careful rounds complete. The tide will turn again before dawn. It always turns. It always returns. You are held tonight too, by this same ancient, patient rhythm, by the same dark rock, the same returning water, the same small, persistent lives. You do not need to observe anything tonight. You only need to rest, the way the tide pools rest, briefly, completely, trusting the larger rhythm to carry them safely through until morning. You are safe. You are warm. You are held on the shore, beneath the old rock, in the dark, patient, returning sea. The tide will keep its rhythm all through the night. The rock will keep its ancient watch. And you can simply rest. Good night, dear friend. Sleep well, sleep deeply. Good night, and